How to help your kids cope with stress and anxiety. Our children are like adults. They can feel pain, frustration, disappointment, and anxiety. Learn how to watch for signs of unease and fear, and how to help your children cope with the stressors life throws their way. Teaching our kids positive, uplifting ways to handle the things that stress them can boost their confidence for life and can stop little worries from spiraling into something more serious, like an anxiety disorder. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi. How you doing today? I'm doing fantastic. If you were to ask me, I hope you are doing as great. And if you are, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or vodka. Let's roll. Today we want to have a conversation about a salient topic. A very interesting and important topic. How to help your kids, and kids in general, cope with stress and anxiety. Now, bad things happen in life. Everybody knows that, right? Whether it is a parent's illness or a national tragedy or a global pandemic like coronavirus, those things happen. And you want to learn how to help your kids with anxiety by giving them the proper tools they need to manage stress. The stress not only coming from within, but also from without. Okay? There are four things that I want to talk to you right now about when it comes to helping kids cope with disappointment and tragedy. That's the first part here. I want to talk about how to help your kids cope with disappointment and tragedy. Now let's talk about news events or disasters, right? If you have a global pandemic or you have some kind of hurricane or some kind of weather event, kids feel the effect as well. What you want to do here is that you want to be able to keep the whole conversation into perspective. You want to provide context so that the child understands that this thing that is happening is neither their fault or not your fault or nobody's fault. Those things happen. All right. One thing you want to do with news events, for example, is you don't want to put the TV on 24/7 because there's something called news anxiety that has been studied by universities across the world, whereby people who watch news 24/7, they develop some kind of anxiety disorder. You want to prevent your children from having the same problem. So if the situation is about a news event, you can talk about it, you can let them watch properly and reasonably, and after that you just turn on the TV and turn on any device. Nowadays we have children having smartphones. What you have to do is you have to put some kind of app that blocks access to news platforms. All right. Now, for disasters, the conversation should be very simple. Those are natural things that happen. It's nobody's fault. But again, you want to limit the exposure of the child to the news about that disaster. Let's talk about death. Now, death is another tragedy that is part of life, of course. But children, you need to have the conversation with the children around death. There are several ways. There are several schools of thoughts when it comes to having a conversation around death. But all those schools of thought say one thing: be truthful to the child. Have an age-appropriate conversation. For example, if a kid asks you what happens after we die, for instance, you can say something like, "We go to a place of peace. We go to a place where we play. Nobody has never been there and come back, but I believe that this place is very nice." Now, you're not lying to your child. You're not also telling the truth because you have no idea. Nobody has ever gone and come back, but you're giving them an age-appropriate conversation, right? Or you might say, "I don't know, honey. I don't know. But I guess it must be very nice because grandpa went and he never came back. Grandma went and she never came back. So I think it's good." Now, if children ever ask you whether they are going to die, if your child asks you whether he or she's ever going to die, you have to be truthful. Yes, everybody dies one day, but it is great. But the most important thing is to focus on life, on what you do in life, on having fun today, on having purpose in life, on having a meaningful life. If you have a sport loss, let's say there is a game that was lost and the child is very sad or anxious. Again, you have to put these things into perspective to understand that basically you don't want to have any kind of anxiety laden conversation here. put things into perspective. A game is a game. There will be other games. Tell the child that, today's game was lost, but tomorrow's game might be won or will be won, right? Or everything is in life, you have ups and downs. That's the kind of the gist of my conversation around this topic, is to provide context and always be truthful to the child. For example, let's say you might go back to, you might show the child pictures of the past where you showed him or her how the same team that lost today had won in the past. Another element of disappointment and tragedy could be a bad grade, right? Because a bad grade can feel like the end of the world to a child, especially in their teen years, when the pressure of college admissions is on the horizon. So you want to keep it in perspective for your child. What I'm trying to say here again is that you want to provide context, right? One bad grade is just one bad grade. As long as you don't have a series, you don't accumulate a series of bad grades, you still have your chance, right? This is very important. It doesn't mean your child is going to fail the class. So you want to encourage him or her to let it go and focus on the next exam, right? Now, the thing here is that kids are usually more likely to talk about the grade if you sympathize first with their embarrassment or anger. So you want to give your child time to react on his or her own. Then you ask questions to help her figure out what happened, right? Did they not understand the work? Did they make careless mistakes? Did they do their homework? Whatever it is, you want to understand the source of that F grade, right? Because even if the F grade is her fault or his fault, you still want to have a conversation with the child so that you understand the source of the situation. And then you can talk about how to correct the problem in the future, right? It's all about first doing the analysis of what happened, and then finding solutions, and then implementing those solutions. I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi. We're also having a conversation today around how to help your kids cope with stress and anxiety. In the first section, I talked about how to help your kids cope with disappointment and tragedy. Now, I want to talk to you about how to help your kids handle transitions and milestones. Before I do so, please consider subscribing to our channel if you haven't already done so. We provide a beautiful array of content every day, rain or shine, and turn on the notification bell so you are informed by the platform where you listen to from that we have released a new show. Share this content, like, and comment. Okay, how do you help your kids handle transitions and milestones? Now, change is hard for everyone, right? But some kids have a harder time than others in dealing with transitions. And one of the main causes that fuels a child's anxiety is the fear of the unknown, right? The uncertainty, because that child is getting out of his or her comfort zone. There is a reason why it's called comfort zone, because this is where he or she used to feel comfortable. Now, outside that comfort zone, you have the fear of the unknown. And this can be very, very scary. It can seem like a scary monster looming in the distance. So one thing you want to do is that to kind of quell that anxiety, to quell that pessimism, make sure your child is well prepared for what's coming. So you want to do some preparation, some prep work. Sit down with your child before any event and discuss what will happen, right? The thing here is that you want to focus on honesty, clarity and honesty. Be specific and give details, right? You can say something like, it really depends on the age of the child. Also depends on the situation itself. So let's say, for instance, that you know that you will be leaving the city because you just got a job. You, the parent, of course, you got a job somewhere in California, and you'll be living in Chicago for the last 5 or 6 years. And your child, in the meantime, has had all her friends in that neighborhood. So you can have a conversation with her and say, listen, I start showing pictures of your new neighborhood or your intended neighborhood, the California, the city where you're going, and start showing her how beautiful that place also is and how many children are still there, so that he or she can can befriend some of them. So you're trying to provide things in context. Before you give the bad news, quote unquote bad news, you show the other good news, right? Now let's talk now about separation anxiety. Separation anxiety is basically what I just talked about in terms of kids are really scared about leaving behind their friends, their toys, their environment, their childhood, even though they're still children, right? Because separation anxiety typically begins around 10 months old, and this can last to about age 3 and sometimes even longer. A Stanford researcher has found that separation anxiety can happen even all the way to 7 years old. So one way to help prepare your little ones for goodbyes is to read a story like Anna Dudney, or you can watch a movie, a Disney movie with them, because reading books about transitions like the first day of school sort of helps normalize the experience, and most importantly reassures children that everything will turn out okay. For children, it's very important to understand that the departure from the old to the new is not really that big of a deal, right? So it's really smart. For example, if you have a child that has to go from kindergarten to grade school, for example, you want to visit the child care facility or school with your infants or toddlers before the first day, right? Let's talk about the first crush. Now, first crush is also an important sort of transition and milestones that children have to deal with. So if you can remember your nervousness and maybe awkwardness about your first crush, we all do, you probably get a sense of why your child is freaking out over every conversation with his or her object of affection, right? So you want to talk about it. You want to have a conversation around, let's do this. Take the first crush, your child's first crush, as a great opportunity to begin a conversation around differences in people, qualities that attract one person to another, the strengths and weaknesses of people in general. You want to have a conversation around that, right? It doesn't matter whether you believe your child's crush is ugly or is just not a good choice. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that your child thinks that he or she is just great, and trying to embrace that and trying to have a conversation so you can actually mold your child's thinking at this point. College admissions. Earlier I was talking about how important or how devastating sometimes, not devastating, that's the bad word here, but college, if you have a teenager who has a bad grade, he or she will just dramatize the whole thing sometimes, or will just feel very, very crippled by it. And that's because of college admissions, right? Because the children are now thinking, if I don't get good grades, I will miss out on life. I'm not getting into a good university, blah, 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 blah. So you want to teach your children to take responsibility for their schoolwork so that they are better prepared for the stress of college preparation. So another thing you want to do here is that don't wait. If you are a parent whose children, if you have children under the age of 10, don't wait until they got into their teen years to instill this helpful habits. What you want to do is you want to help your children start thinking already as a freshman, as a college freshman, right? So instead of focusing on what kids aren't doing, you want to get a step ahead of the commotion here by praising them for positive behavior. For example, they completed their homework on time. They got an A+ on a minor subject. They got a B- on a major subject. Little things, compliments on little things can go a long way towards reinforcing your child's self-esteem and self-confidence. I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Q. We're also having a conversation around how to help your kids cope with stress and anxiety. And I'm giving you the third element here, how to help your kids deal with everyday stresses. So we've talked about how to cope with disappointment and tragedy, how to cope with transitions and milestones. Now let's talk about everyday stress. Now, we all deal with stress and anxiety on a daily basis, right? Even kids. Now, the last thing you want to do as a parent is to trivialize his concerns, right? Because instinctively you might try to soothe him or her with an upbeat platitude, right? Don't worry, it will be fine. Things are always fine. That's a platitude. It might work when they were younger, but now that they get into teenage years or they are getting a little older and older, they know definitely that something is wrong, right? So what you want to do instead is you want to have the conversation, because if you give a platitude such as "don't worry, it will be fine, things will be fine," that actually minimizes her feelings without giving her the tools for handling her worries, right? So now let's talk about the nightmares. Nightmares are part of everyday stress if you think about it. And research has shown that toddlers as young as 1.5 years old, they can have nightmares. So toddlers are having nightmares. Think about teenagers. It's even higher, right? The rate of nightmares is very high. So what you want to do is, if somebody has a scary dream, for example, you want to discuss this. You want to have a conversation around the nightmare, the content of it, the intent of it, how he or she felt in the nightmare, and you can start a conversation around what are the daily routine that brings about this sort of nightmares. Another thing you want to do is staying with a babysitter. Now you have to understand that traditional separation anxiety may wane in the preschool years. However, your child may still be apprehensive about staying home with someone other than you, right? So, we were all talking about how people sometimes are excited for a change, but when it comes to a babysitter, you want to do things gradually. And the best way to do this is to use the same approach you use in kindergarten. So the first few days or weeks, you are able to stay with the babysitter and your child, so he or she becomes familiar with the other person before you actually cut off the ties, right? While you're working or while you are on a trip for work, somebody's taking care of your child for you. Another thing you want to think about is friendship and social media. Now, you have to understand that teens nowadays live in an ocean of social media drama. A lot's going on between WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Google, whatever. We live in a world right now where teenagers believe that friendships can be built, can be cultivated over the internet. And reality has shown that having 1,000 friends on Facebook, for instance, doesn't mean that you have 1,000 friends in real life. Otherwise, it will be not only non-manageable, but also very difficult to hang out with. Right? So what you want to do here is that situations like not getting invited to a party and later learning about it on Instagram can be crushing for many teenagers, right? So if your teen, for instance, is worried about being left out in real life or on social media, you want to empathize with his or her feelings. Let him or her know that it's hard to have that much information about what he or she is missing, really, right? And you also want to talk about, and again, provide context. Right? Provide context, and also try to explain to her that it's not his or her fault. Maybe the party space was small, or their parents made them invite family friends. And remind your teenager all the time that hanging out with a mix of people is a normal part of social life. All right, folks, this is the end of today's conversation. I really appreciate your attention. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. I will see you next time, but before I do so, let me recap today's conversation: how to help your kids how to help your kids cope with anxiety and stress. All right, the recap here is this. Number 1, how to help your kids cope with disappointment and tragedy. Number 2, how to help your kids handle transitions and milestones. And number 3, how to help your kids deal with everyday stress. I will talk to you another time, but until then, remember, stay marvelous.